Okay, so we're back. Now, why do we make these illusory correlations? Why do we see relationships between things that are not actually related to each other? Well, one of the reasons why is that we focus on hits and we ignore the misses. If you want to watch the video that I've linked that contains John Edward, who's this so-called medium. He claims to be able to talk to the dead. And he used to have a TV show that was on prime time on a major network. I think it was NBC. And so people would come to his show, and he probably still does shows. And they would want to be talking to somebody who has passed on and find out that they're okay, or that, whatever their goals were. And he would claim that he could see the departed loved one standing over your shoulder, and that departed loved one would tell him things that only that person would know. And, he really was very convincing to a lot of people. A lot of people really believed that there was no way he could have known the things that he was saying. In this clip that I've linked, he is doing what he does, which is he says so many things, and they're all wrong. But nobody really notices that he's said 10, 15 things that have been incorrect before he actually says something that's right. All they notice is that once he says something that's accurate, they're like, yes, that's my loved one. And they ignore that he said he made a bunch of guesses leading up to saying the correct thing, the one right thing. And once the one right thing has been said, now that he's figured out who he's talking to and what he should be saying, he can rely on their feedback to help him to tailor what he's saying. So the reason why that whole system works is that the participants in the audience are focusing on the hits, the times that he's right, and they're ignoring the misses, all the things that he's saying that are wrong. When I teach this class live, I actually pause the piece periodically. Like, he says probably 5 things in 2 seconds. It's your dad, your grandfather, your son. Yeah, he'll say a bunch of things. I'm getting a male energy. The male energy is a young male energy. It's a nephew. It's a son. It's a brother. He says a bunch of things really super fast, so that when finally the person in the audience says, "Oh yeah, I think you're talking about my dearly departed," you don't even notice that he had said a young energy, like a son, a nephew, grandson, and the audience member actually said, "Yes, I think you're talking about my loved one, my dad." Okay, that's a pretty big wrong. I mean, he did not name dad in that list at all. A person older than you was not on the list at all. And so nobody in the audience seemed upset about that. Nobody was like, wait a second, you said it was going to be a son, a grandson, or a nephew. And now you're calling on her and she's saying it's her dad. Nobody says anything because they're like so swept up in, oh, you said something that she recognizes. And then he goes, and then I let the video run a little bit longer, and he goes on and he says, I think it has something to do with a holiday. I think I see a bunch of American flags. It's a holiday. It's a time of celebration, he says. And then she goes, yes, he died on 9/11. Okay, you could not be a lot more wrong. I'll give you American flags. Nothing else that he said was correct. But she's not even upset about it. He says, I get something in the bones. Something's wrong with his bones. No, he actually got killed in 9/11. He did not have a bone problem. So many misses. But you have to slow him down because he says so many things that all the audience can do is remember the hits, the times that he stops for a moment and says, okay, now I know what I'm talking about. Let's spend a second thinking about the thing that you just verified. We focus on the hits. We ignore the misses. So let's talk about it in a little bit more concrete way. So you guys, if you want to go watch the John Edward piece, it's pretty interesting. Remember to slow it down and look for what I'm talking about. But think about psychic predictions in general. So we've got this nice little grid where we have, was the event predicted? Yes or no? And then did the event occur? Yes or no? Psychics get all sorts of attention for that upper left box. They predicted an event and it ended up coming true. no one really notices the times that they didn't predict an event and it occurred, or that they didn't predict an event and it didn't occur. Nobody cares about that bottom row. The psychic didn't say anything about the event, so why would we even tie it to the psychic? Well, I mean, if the psychic's a psychic, you would think they'd be predicting important things, right? But we ignore those times that they don't mention something that ends up happening. We also don't notice the times that the psychic predicts that something's going to happen and then it never occurs. Now, that's a pretty big miss, to say that something's going to happen and then it never happens. Of course, what can a psychic say? It just hasn't happened yet, right? How many times have people predicted that the world's going to end? And when it doesn't end on their predicted date, they say, well, maybe I got the year wrong. Maybe I got the date wrong. It's still going to happen, right? And that's one of the nice fallback protections that we have when we're being psychics. We can say, it hasn't occurred yet. So what do consumers of psychic predictions focus on? The hits. The yes, I predicted it, yes, it occurred. That's what people notice. So with psychics, we really display this power of belief, right? We want to know it. We want to be able to know the future. We want to be able to communicate with our loved ones who are gone. We want to believe these things are true, that we could read minds or that other things could happen. So because of that strong, desire for it to be true, we notice any time that it is true. Back to those coincidences that I was discussing before, right? The idea that it happened as predicted is like, wow, that's amazing. How'd they predict it? Well, if I say enough things, some of it's going to come true, right? Another reason why we focus on hits versus misses is because some kinds of things are one-sided events. Certain events are the kinds of events that one direction is more noticeable than the two-sided events where either direction would be noticeable. So one-sided would be where one outcome is more noticeable than the other. So, for example, if you just washed your car and then it rains, you're like, man, I just washed my car. I used to live in Southern California as a kid and as a young driver, and I swear I rarely washed my car because it was just so hopeless down there. It was anyway. So I would finally break down and wash my car, and then it would rain, and I'm like, I think I made it rain. I think I literally made it rain because I washed my car. Clearly, I did not make it rain. When the phone rings and you're in the shower, you're like, I just got in the shower. Why did you have to ring now? The phone always rings when I'm in the shower. Well, no, it doesn't. Probably, 99.9% of the time that you've taken a shower, it's never rung. You, in fact, listening to me might be like, the phone has never rung while I was in the shower. What are you talking about? Because it hasn't happened to you yet. My psychic prediction, it hasn't happened yet. The idea is that you can notice the times that it does happen more easily than you notice the times that it doesn't happen. My last example is, you're running for the elevator, or, you're just heading to the elevator and it's just closing as you arrive. You're like, wait for me. Oh, I missed it. That's so much more noticeable than all the times that you get there and the doors are just already closed and you have to wait for it. Or you happen to just luck out and walk right on it. Those aren't as noticeable. What's noticeable is when you almost had it but you missed it. Those are one-sided events. Two-sided events are those times when the event produces outcomes that would be equally noticeable, which might mean equally not that important and we don't notice either side, or equally important and we notice both sides. Either way, we are more likely to form illusory correlations on one-sided events than we are to form illusory correlations on two-sided events. So, and when an event seems like it's linked to something else, it's because one side is more noticeable, and so it catches our attention. Why? Why do we form these illusory correlations? So part of it is we focus on hits versus misses. Part of it is because we fail to notice all the relevant information. There was a big scientific study that came out that reported, and I've got it linked here in case you're interested, that reported that they studied cats who survived falls from 2 stories high to up to 32 stories high. Of the 132 cats included in the study who had fallen, only 8 of them died. So the people who reported on this finding were like, wow, how are all these cats surviving this fall? And that's a pretty good question. How do all these cats survive these 2 to 32-story falls? But so they spend a lot of time trying to figure out, why are these cats surviving these falls? So they come up with a bunch of explanations like the laws of physics are special and different for cats, that they have light bones or dense fur or something that's making it possible for them to, sort of descend more slowly than we would descend. Maybe it's their superior balance, right? Their ability to always land on their feet. I don't know if you've ever seen a cat falling from something, but a lot of times they rotate their tails. So maybe there's like a little bit of a, as they're twisting and stuff like that, they're slowing their own descent. Maybe some people had argued the loose skin that's on their sides, when they do right themselves and have their feet pointing towards the floor, their legs get a little bit extended and they sort of get a little bit of the flying squirrel effect where that skin on the side can kind of slow their descent. So these different explanations were offered for why cats were surviving these falls so readily. The thing that they didn't really mention in the study was, wait a second, of the 132 cats that fell, only 8 died. These are 132 cats that were brought to the vet. So I don't know about you guys, but if my cat fell from something and died in the fall, I don't think I'd take my cat to the vet, right? If the cat died in the fall, you'd probably, bury it yourself because you can already tell that the cat's dead. So of the 132 cats that lived initially through the fall, only 8 more died, is a good way to put it. Like, one of the things about this failure to notice relevant information is that we're focusing on the survivors. How many cats have fallen from 2 stories or higher and died? We don't really have data on that. So we go to all these extents to explain through, laws of physics, superior balance, flying squirrel tactic, all these things to account for this finding, when maybe what the question we need to be asking is, well, wait a minute, are these just really remarkable cats where something remarkable happened? Maybe they hit an awning on their way down or something that slowed it. We don't know, right? Like maybe there's something special about these 132 cats who lived long enough to be taken to the vet and still 8 of them died. I mean, we don't really know. What we're doing is we're only focusing on the surprising part, and we're not focusing on other possible explanations. In case you feel like I'm making us feel bad because these are everyday thought errors that we make, NASA made the same exact kind of mistake of failing to notice all the relevant information when they were making their decision about whether the Space Shuttle Challenger should be launched on its fateful day when it should not have been launched. They knew it was exceptionally cold that day in Cape Canaveral, where they were getting ready to launch the Space Shuttle Challenger. And so they thought they better investigate to see whether temperature mattered. And so they collected all the data on all the launch failures that they had ever had in Cape Canaveral. And they found that it looks from this data, if we look at the number of failures, it looks like temperature doesn't really matter. That they've actually had more failures above, at 70 degrees or above, than they've had at, less than 55 degrees. And I think it was 38 degrees on the day that they were launching. So they looked at this data and they said it looks like it's spread all over the temperatures. There's 4 failures at 60 degrees or less, and there's 5 failures at 60 degrees or more. Kind of looks like it doesn't really matter. So they launched, and as you guys know, it did matter. When they graphed out the number of failures, it really looks like a zero correlation between temperature and likelihood of failure. So they went ahead and they launched. After the launch, when they had a failure, they decided to look at all the data. And, now if we look at it like this and we look at all the launches, and we put zeros for the times that they didn't have a failure, and then spread it out across all the temperatures, now you realize they mostly launch at warmer temperatures. And so those 4 failures that happened at higher temperatures were in amongst a whole bunch of successful launches. at everything from 65 and below, they're having failures at each of those temperatures. So had they looked at all the data, they would have realized it really did matter, that actually the higher the temperature, the lower the rate of failures. And so they shouldn't have launched on that cold day. So failing to look at all the information. One of the things that causes us to notice hits or causes us to fail to notice all the information is something called odd matches. Odd matches are two things that don't really seem like they should be going together, so they really catch our attention. We really notice pairings that seem odd. Like when you find out that the same person has been struck by lightning more than once. You're like, I thought lightning never strikes twice. How did you get hit twice? Lightning does strike twice. I've got a couple of videos on that if you want to see it. One of them has to do with actual lightning. One of them has to do with, deaths on the same day. It catches our attention when we see those things, and we think something meaningful is going on when we see that something unexpected got paired. The thing is, rare things happen. Some people have been struck by lightning more than once. Some people have won the lottery more than once. Rare things happen. When we talk about things that are really rare, like for example, autism is really rare. It's 1 out of 50 people. That's two, and that's like the most stringent diagnosis would be about 2% of the population has autism, and so it's probably, depending on what state you live, things like that. It can be as much as 1 in 50 and as little as 1 in 175. Nation average, somewhere around 1 to 2%. It's fairly rare. But when we notice that it's going up, right? When we see that it went from 1 in 89 to 1 in 63 to 1 in 50, it makes us say, what's causing that? Right? It's the thing that our brains are designed for, is to say, what is causing this pattern? And I guess the ancillary is, how do we stop it, right? And so, or how, when it's something that we want, how can we make it happen more often, as if we have control over things that we don't really have control over. When we look at something like peanut allergies, the rate tripled between 1997 and 2008. Now that sounds horrible, except for if you look at the rate, it went from 0.4% of the population to 1.4% of the population having peanut allergies. And then you realize it's still really exceptionally rare. I saw a Facebook story. It wasn't on Facebook. It was a story about Facebook, saying that somebody had posted that she observed a woman putting her baby or toddler who was eating a peanut butter sandwich into the cart at Target, and doesn't she know that other kids who are allergic to peanuts might use that cart and get exposed? And as if peanuts are a toxin to everyone. And of course, it is really highly dangerous to 1.4% of the population. I think people who have that kind of allergies probably wipe stuff down before they put their children in contact with it, because you never know who's been in contact with what. But this story about this posting was, this person was quite shocked that anybody in the world would have peanuts, this clear, deadly thing. And the truth is, it can be very deadly to some people, but to the vast majority, it's not. In fact, there's 3 times the rate of people being allergic to shellfish. So, I mean, if a child was sitting in the cart eating a spring roll, would the Facebook poster have said the same kinds of things, right? It's kind of an interesting, it's whatever's on the top of your mind. And so if it's happening in your family, it's 100%. And so it feels very much like something worth noticing. And why is my child allergic to peanuts? And those kinds of thoughts make a lot of sense. But if it's something really super rare, it catches our attention, even though it might not be the thing that we should be the most aware of. So in conclusion, we have to be really careful about applying meaning to coincidences. Sometimes a coincidence is just a coincidence, right? It's just something that looks like it could have been pre-planned, but it really is happening by accident. Just because something attracts our attention does not mean it's significant. I brought up Facebook. It's something that back in the olden days of, the 90s, the same information that now gets posted on things like Facebook and other social media sites to get people all freaked out used to be passed around via email, and probably before that it was in the newspaper. And, just historically humans like to pass around scary stuff. Just because something catches our attention doesn't mean that it's likely, or that we're at risk, or that we should, pay money to somebody to get it to happen for us, like in the case of John Edward. Just because it catches our attention doesn't mean that it's significant. So those are the things I wanted you to take away from this chapter. All right, I will see you guys in chapter 12.